Breaking tonight, Hillary Clinton under mounting pressure tonight from the left and the right to shut the doors of her Clinton Foundation once and for all. And tonight, the Clintons are fighting back. Big time. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. 24 hours ago, we brought you a stunning report from the Associated Press suggesting Hillary Clinton held many meetings with Clinton Foundation donors while she was supposed to be doing the American people's business. The AP found that of the 154 people from private interests who met or had phone conversations with then Secretary of State Clinton, more than half, or 85 of them, gave money to her foundation, the Clinton Foundation, for a combined total of $156 million. The Clinton campaign quickly hitting back, saying this report is flawed. And earlier today at a campaign stop, former President Bill Clinton chimed in. Watch.
We're trying to do good things. If there's something wrong with creating jobs and saving lives, I don't know what it is. And the people who gave the money knew exactly what they were doing. And I have nothing to say about it. I'm really proud. I'm proud of what they've done.
We begin tonight with our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, reporting from Washington. Catherine?
Megyn, tonight the Associated Press is standing its ground after Hillary Clinton's team tried and failed to get a correction. The Clinton campaign complained on the morning shows that this AP tweet was unfair, not accurate, and based on limited information.
By our count, there were over 1,700 other meetings that she had. You know, she was Secretary of State. She was meeting with foreign officials and government officials constantly. So to pull all of them out of the equation, cherry pick a very small number of meetings is pretty outrageous.
And the White House defended Clinton, telling reporters that even before she became Secretary of State, there was a transparency agreement.
To ensure that the ethics requirements that are in place went above and beyond those guidelines that are set by law.
But the Associated Press says their reporting is based on documents released by a federal court after they had to sue the State Department, and it took 3 years for the AP to get the Clinton schedules that showed the foundation donors. And it made sense to analyze meetings outside her regular government duties as secretary. Quote, this reporting was done by the same AP investigative team that discovered Mrs. Clinton's private email server and whose reporting last week resulted in the resignation of Donald Trump's top campaign strategist. Megyn?
Catherine Herridge, thank you. In just a few moments, we're going to speak with Congressman Trey Gowdy, who just got back from Capitol Hill, where he personally reviewed some of the FBI's documents from its investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server. He'll tell us what he found. But first, we are joined by Roland Martin, host and managing editor of TV One's News One Now. Roland, great to have you on the program. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here.
So what do you make of this, of the Clinton Foundation? As we're just looking through the publications today, USA Today, Boston Globe, New York Post, Detroit News, Daily Beast, all saying this thing ought to be shut down at a minimum if she wins.
Well, first and foremost, if she wins the presidency, you will have her as president. You will have former President Bill Clinton serving as first husband, if you will. I do believe what they should do is transition out of business because even though they've done phenomenal work, you're now the commander-in-chief. You're now the leader of the free world. And so, look, I sit on a group of 50 CAN education group, Students First. We merge transferred assets. And so you can do that. You can partner with an existing NGO to do the work.
But do you think it's shady now? What do you think of the existence of it now? Laura Ingraham was on Fox earlier calling the Clinton Foundation a machine for influence peddling. She's suggesting that they use it. They use it to sort of, to get donations. They use her power as Secretary of State to sort of convince people to donate to their foundation.
Well, first of all, I would disagree with that because let's keep in mind, she's a former First Lady. She's a former United States Senator. I think she probably has a hell of a lot more relationships, even if she wasn't Secretary of State. And the reality is the work that they're doing as an NGO across the world is critically important. You have President Jimmy Carter, who probably comes closest to having his own organization that does work around the world. It's very rare to, frankly, have a former president that has this type of entity. So I would say Laura is absolutely wrong. She certainly has an axe to grind line here. I don't. The bottom line is here, they do good work, but I do believe what the Clinton folks have to understand is it's not simply just a question of what took place in meetings. It's also the appearance. And so I think one of the things that they should do, and they really should do this, they should say after Labor Day, they are going to suspend accepting any funds into the foundation because you're in the middle of a presidential campaign. I believe be far more proactive as opposed to reactive. That's what the Clintons should be doing.
Roland, do you like her? I know that you're a big supporter of President Obama's. What do you think of her?
I've met her. She's a nice woman. I've been critical of her, just like I've been critical of the president. Last time I interviewed him was 7 years ago, so it's not like we've been buddy-buddy. But again, just like anybody who's in political office, you know, I have a very simple philosophy, Megyn. If you do good, I'll talk about you. If you do bad, I'll talk about you. At the end of the day, I'll talk about you.
Before I let you go, because that was a great sign-off, but I have to ask you, are you open-minded to Donald Trump?
Here's the deal. I have interviewed a significant number of African Americans, and I have been asking the exact same question over and over and over. Where is your plan? Look, I voted for Republicans before, so this ain't the first time. I look at individuals, but the problem for me is this here. Donald Trump gives great comments. It's on a bumper sticker, but there's no specificity. There's no plans. And then when he keeps saying stuff that you come back and say, wait a minute, that's not true. I got a problem when you simply, as somebody running for office, cannot even tell me how you're going to pay for your tax plan. You don't talk about HBCUs. You talk about African Americans, but then where's your plan? I'm sorry, he's all hat and no cattle. That's what we say in my native Texas.
Roland, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Likewise. Thanks a lot. Joining
us now in a Kelly File exclusive, South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy, the former chairman of the Select Committee on Benghazi. Great to see you, sir. So today you had an interesting day taking a look at some documents that the FBI had prior to you getting a look at them. Did you find anything particularly interesting about these documents that Hillary provided the FBI?
Yes, ma'am. Keep in mind, one notebook were the classified emails that she handled so negligently. The other notebook are the witness interviews, the summaries, what we call 302s. My number one takeaway, Megyn, is there's no reason in the world you could not and should not be able to look at the same witness interviews that I had to go to Washington and look at in a classified setting. You and your viewers should be able to read summaries of these witness interviews. The second takeaway is a lot of the FBI's time and attention was spent debunking and refuting these fantastically false statements that Secretary Clinton made at the inception of this email story. And the third takeaway, remember, Director Comey said that he could not indict, did not have a realistic probability of a successful prosecution on the issue of intent. So I looked to see what witnesses were questioned on the issue of intent, including her, and I didn't see that many questions.
Let's go back to number two.
Issue.
Let's go back to the second point, which is how much time they had to spend debunking what you say were lies or falsehoods that she told. What do you mean by that?
Oh, even something as seemingly innocuous as us referring to Sidney Blumenthal as her advisor. Remember, she got really upset when we used that term. You'll never guess which term the FBI used when they described Sidney Blumenthal and his relationship to her. He was interviewed. I think you would find very interesting what Colin Powell had to say and juxtapose that with what Clinton supporters have said over the last 48 hours. You go back, the multiple devices, how many phones she had, the very reason she set it up. All of that proved to be fantastically
And I want
false.
to ask you this. So she also, of course, claimed that she never sent or received classified information. We now know that that's not true. I know you thought it might be interesting if the American people could see who sent some of the emails that she received with the classified information. What do you mean by that? Why would that be so interesting?
Well, right now, even Congress can't see the identities of them. They are so classified that even a congressman in a skiff with no telephone, no iPad, no notes, cannot even see who the author or the originator of that email string was. That is how classified that information was that she was handling on a non-secure server. Mm-hmm. So Sidney Blumenthal is one author. Of course, you know Cheryl Mills and Numa Abedin and Jake Sullivan, but there are even some originators that even members of Congress cannot see the identity of them because of the nature of the information.
But meanwhile, she was saying, I had no idea, no, classified, no. Congressman Trey Gowdy, great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Also tonight, new reason for Hillary Clinton to be very concerned about a potential October surprise. The fugitive founder of the controversial group WikiLeaks is here in an exclusive interview on the information he holds and what it may mean for Mrs. Clinton. Don't miss Julian Assange. You know, right now, according to the average of all polls, she's beating Donald Trump by 5.5 points nationwide. She's way ahead of him in most of the swing states, not all. Do you believe the information in your possession could be a game changer in the U.S. election? Breaking tonight with just 75 days to go until the election, a series of unflattering new revelations about Hillary Clinton and possible influence peddling have come to light. And there are new reports now from campaign insiders that Mrs. Clinton plans to, quote, run out the clock, largely ignoring these controversies until the voters go to the polls. But our next guest has other plans. He says his website, WikiLeaks, is set to publish information that will not be helpful to Mrs. Clinton, and it may force her to respond. Moments ago, we had a lengthy and fascinating conversation with Julian Assange, co-founder and editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks. He only agreed to speak to us from an undisclosed location since he is currently wanted for extradition by Sweden, and he's under investigation by the U.S. government, too, for his role in the largest leak of classified documents in U.S. history. Here is part one of that exclusive interview. Watch. Julian, thank you very much for being here. So let's start with the additional information you have regarding Hillary Clinton. When can we expect this information?
While we're working around the clock, we have received quite a lot of material, stimulated, of course, by the US election process and by our major DNC revelation, which has now led to the resignation of 5 top officials in the DNC, including Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the president, the last one, late last week. So, you know, it's a complex business, what we do. We have to assess the veracity. We have a perfect 10-year record so far in never getting it wrong. We want to keep that reputation, understand how things should be formatted, what media we should be involved in, what is the best way to stage it out. Do we accumulate everything, assess it, publish it all in one batch, or do we do several batches? The approach that we've decided to take is that we do several batches.
But give us a general sense. I mean, are we going to see it before the November 8th election?
Yes, absolutely. In the case of the DNC leaks, for example, we pushed as fast as we could to try and get it in before the Democratic nomination conference, because obviously people have a right to understand who it is that they're nominating and what sort of process was involved. And the same is true here for the US electoral process. People involved in that election have the right to understand who it is they're electing.
Now, you've seen it, right? Can you tell us how significant you believe it is? I mean, compare its significance to what we saw released by WikiLeaks in July.
Well, I don't want to scoop ourselves. We have a lot of pages of material, thousands of pages of material. So no, I have not read every single page. We're hard at work in doing that, trying to understand, etc. I don't want to give the game away, but it's a variety of different types of documents from different types of institutions that are associated with the election campaign. Some quite unexpected angles that are quite interesting. Some even entertaining.
Do you right now, according to the average of all polls, she's beating Donald Trump by 5.5 points nationwide. She's way ahead of him in most of the swing states, not all. Do you believe the information in your possession could be a game changer in the U.S. election?
I think it's significant. It depends on how it catches fire in the public and in the media.
Joining us now, Chris Stirewalt, our Fox News digital politics editor, and Dana Perino, former White House press secretary and co-host of The Five. Part 2 of our interview is with Assange is tomorrow, and wait until you see it. Okay, so this is something a lot of people talk about, which is the October surprise. And despite all the polling we've seen for Hillary Clinton in her favor, whether that guy I just talked to has got the one thing that really could stop her, some sort of a bombshell, that could be a deal breaker for her. Dana, what are your thoughts?
Well, he has the gift of understatement in a way, right? This is what you call a deep tease. So he's going to string us along, and I think that Republicans will probably hope that there is something that will make so many Democrats stay home that it depresses the Democratic turnout and that Donald Trump can somehow get to victory that way. I would imagine, given, he said that they worked very hard in order to get the DNC leaks out just in time. But they did it the night before.
Well, he's admitted that they did that to influence. They want attention.
Make a prediction that whatever it is that he has will come out the night before the third presidential debate.
Because that's close enough in time to really have an impact on the election?
Because she would be forced to have to answer it on the debate stage. The third debate is the one that everyone pays attention to. I'm not giving Assange any ideas. I'm just assuming
He's
this
writing
is
this
what
down.
he is thinking. Because that would be, that everybody's going to be watching that debate in particular. It will. I imagine that as these debates go, some people will think Trump won one, that she won the other, and it'll come down to the third one, and we'll have this big, massive story right beforehand, and she'll have to deal with it.
The thing is, Chris, and we get into this more with Assange tomorrow, he does not like Donald Trump. He's not a fan of Trump, but he really doesn't like Hillary Clinton at all. And I think he'd be just fine if he released something that hurt her campaign at a critical moment in this contest.
What is Hillary Clinton but the embodiment of the American bipartisan national security state? Hillary Clinton is a continuation, a re-intensification of the American national security state that Julian Assange and others as part of this movement detest when it comes to the national security apparatus that is involved in tracking phone calls, that is involved in all of that stuff.
But not even that. Not only that, he also thinks that she's a hawk. He's pointed to her, pushing of the policy in Libya and getting Gaddafi out of there and so on, which he thinks is a disaster, and he doesn't like her on a number of levels.
Of course, and it stands to reason, because Hillary Clinton would be more of a return to more of foreign policy closer to George W. Bush's. Donald Trump represents a dramatic deviation from American foreign policy to this point, in the sense that he is pulling back.
Here's a question for you. I'll ask you this, Chris. Could anything he released, realistically, given his description, it wasn't like he said, I've got a bombshell, you just wait for it, right? It was like, it's quite unexpected, it may be entertaining, it's significant, I don't know. But could it really change the views and the votes in this election? Or are people it's hard to believe that people who are supporting her right now might switch over to Trump.
Millions and millions of Americans are going to vote for people in this election that they say they do not trust. That's a fact. It's going to be true on both sides. It's going to be true for Hillary Clinton that there are going to be millions and millions of people, and the polls tell us, that say they don't trust her, they do not find her honest and trustworthy, but they're going to pull the lever for her anyway. What you need in order, and the Clintons have set this threshold, and the Republicans oddly have reinforced the threshold, which is she's either going to the clink, she's either going up the river, or she's going to the White House. Either she is found to be guilty of a serious crime or whatever.
Or the clink. The fear is maybe not that they're going to switch from Hillary to Trump. The fear on the Clinton people's part. It's that it'll depress enthusiasm.
Right. So if you go back to 2000, that election going into the election day was very close, Gore and Bush. And right before then, remember the news that broke was that George W. Bush had a run-in with the law with a DUI situation that he had not disclosed. And Karl Rove and others will tell you that absolutely depressed evangelical turnout. Now, if Trump can get this election closer and it depresses turnout on her side, maybe that helps.
Fascinating. Great to see you. You as well, Stirewalt. We have much more with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, including questions about the mysterious murder of DNC staffer Seth Rich, who was killed last month in Washington, D.C., and whether he was a potential source for WikiLeaks. Assange goes farther than he's ever gone before on that question. Don't miss that extended interview tomorrow night, 9 p.m. right here on the Kelly File. Well, we also have big news breaking tonight on Donald Trump and a critical part of his pitch to the voters on immigration. He's done a 180 on a big issue. And our all-star panel is next with Sheriff Joe Arpaio, Jose Antonio Vargas, and Eric Erickson. Don't go away. We may be witnessing a new and stunning shift from Donald Trump on immigration tonight. Yesterday, Trump said he would consider softening his plan to deport some 11 million people here illegally. That was, of course, after he spent months making explicit promises that he would not compromise on this point.
We're going to keep the families together. We have to keep the families together.
But you're going to keep
But
them
they have
together
to
out.
go. But they have to go.
What if they have no place to go?
We will work with them. They have to go. Chuck, we either have a country or we don't have a country.
Are you going to have a massive deportation force?
You're going to have a deportation force, and you're going to do it humanely. They're going back where they came. If they came from a certain country, they're going to be brought back to that country. That's the way it's supposed to be. Now, they can come back, but they have to come back legally. We either have a country or we don't have a country. We have at least 11 million people in this country that came in illegally. They will go out.
Now, Trump is suggesting they may not go out, that a policy expelling illegal immigrants and their families could be too tough. Watch this from part 2 of Sean Hannity's town hall, which airs at 10 p.m. tonight. Watch.
Originally, you had said they're all out and there was a big brouhaha, but you're saying that if somebody can prove that they've been here, proven to be a citizen, but well, here's the big question, though.
Go ahead.
No citizenship.
There's no amnesty.
Right.
But we work with them. Now, okay, but when I look at the rooms, and I have this all over, now everybody agrees we get the bad ones out, but when I go through and I meet thousands and thousands of people on this subject, and I've had very strong people come up to me, really great people come up to me, and they've said, Mr. Trump, I love you, but to take a person that's been here for 15 or 20 years and throw them and the family out, it's so tough, Mr. Trump. I mean, I have it all the time. It's a very, very hard thing.
Chief political correspondent Carl Cameron is live in Jackson, Mississippi, where Trump was tonight. Carl?
Yeah, they're breaking down the show here, Megyn, and it was quite a show. Donald Trump didn't talk a great deal about immigration tonight. He did say there would not be amnesty, which is exactly what he said to Sean Hannity. But when you put it into the context of decades of immigration reform battles on Capitol Hill, the question of what constitutes amnesty becomes a critical one. For years, Republican conservatives argued that anything that amounted to citizenship at an end of a process for those who are here undocumented illegal immigrants, that would be amnesty, to what many said would be a path to legal status, which meant they wouldn't get citizenship, but they would be allowed to stay. That appears to be what Donald Trump is warming up to actually announce, though he says it's not amnesty. It is exactly what he accused Jeb Bush and several others of his rivals in the primary process of essentially proposing. Amnesty is anything that allows people to stay here who aren't legal immigrants. That said, there wasn't a lot of talk of that here at the rally tonight. Instead, he went back to the law and order attack on Hillary Clinton, saying that liberal policies have kept down minorities, specifically African Americans and Hispanics, and he upped the rhetoric significantly. And even though his senior new aides have said that the name-calling would subside, it escalated tonight. Listen to this.
Hillary Clinton is a bigot who sees people of color only as votes, not as human beings worthy of a better future. She doesn't care what her policies have done to your communities. Hillary Clinton has no remorse.
Trump has been campaigning in red states here in Mississippi, although he was in Tampa, Florida earlier today. And last night he was in Texas. These are states that have been red and voting for Republicans in presidential races for decades. He should be very, very safe here. He returns going back to battleground states more aggressively tomorrow. But boy, he's left some real footprints. Hillary Clinton is surely not going to tolerate being called a bigot, and she may have some ammunition given some of the rhetoric that Trump has used on the campaign trail for the last 14 months.
Wow.
Megyn?
Carl, thank you. Joining me now, Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Also, Jose Antonio Vargas, the editor of #EmergingUS and founder of DefineAmerican.com, himself an undocumented immigrant. And Eric Erickson, editor of The Resurgent. Great to see you all. Eric, let me start with this, with Trump's clear 180 on his promise to deport all 11 million of those here illegally. I mean, it's a 180, is it not?
Right, it absolutely is. I mean, it turns out Trump's just as much a politician as all the politicians he attacked for being politicians. This was Jeb Bush's position, Marco Rubio's position, John Kasich's position, and Ted Cruz's position, and it wasn't enough for him. He attacked all of them for being soft on immigration, saying we had to round everybody up and send all of them home and maybe they could come back, but was very, very clear they all had to go, and now not so much.
Sheriff Joe, do you deny that this is a 180?
No, I don't know. First of all, we would not be having this conversation if 16 months ago he had the courage to bring up the illegal immigration problem. Nobody wanted to bring it up. He brought it up with the wall, which I agree should be built, and now he's looking at the situation with 11 million people. He's always said you have to obey the law. The last I heard, that if you come into this country illegally, you're violating the law. So let's see what his plan really is. Everybody is.
You just heard him. You just heard him say, no amnesty. We're going to get rid of the bad ones first. But as far as those who have come to this country, he says, you know, those who have been 15 years, 20 years, it's just so tough. And it's a very different message, is it not, Sheriff, from what we've heard from Donald Trump to date?
I don't know. He hasn't made a decision. I'm very happy he's meeting with the minority groups. This is great because he knows how to relate to the people on the streets. I'm sure he's picking up some ideas, but I also believe that he said he's going to enforce the laws. So let's see how this situation falls within the laws when you're talking about visas and
but with all due respect to the sheriff, Jose, he's sort of ignoring the additional part that he gave to Sean Hannity tonight. You know, what he said last night to Sean, which was that he's softening, and what he said tonight, which is, you know, I've been on the campaign trail. This is what I've seen. It's just so tough to deport, which you've been saying, Jose, yourself, that it's, you can't. These people they're part of the American society now, and to rip them out and rip them away from their families is impractical. And you tell me whether he's now rounded back to Jeb Bush's position almost exactly.
And you know what I think is interesting about this is, like, hasn't Donald Trump talked to his own undocumented workers who have built and actually, you know, make sure that his golf courses and his hotels are working properly? Actually, one of my friends, Gabby Pacheco, who's on the board of Define American, met with Donald Trump 3 years ago. And Donald Trump actually said, hey, you know, it makes sense that undocumented young people should be here and should be able to stay. Look, I mean, Eric just said, Donald Trump is a politician. He's flip-flopping, right? And I think what's sad about this is you can't take away all the months and months of comments of Mexicans as rapists, as Muslims as terrorists, all of these blanket, simplistic statements that are not only untrue, but are very hurtful, right? And now he's looking 80 days before the election, and he's like, wait a second, how am I going to win this election without Latino voters and Asian voters and immigrants?
You know, Eric, you have not been a supporter of Mr. Trump's. You're part of the Never Trump crowd, but you've been saying for months that he's gonna reverse it. Like, you can't believe these promises. And it was interesting because during the campaign season, the primary season, I asked him about his flip-flops, his frequent flip-flops at the third presidential debate, the third for Fox News, that is, hosted in Detroit. Watch. Mr. Trump, one of the things people love about you is they believe you tell it like it is. But time and time again in this campaign, you have actually told the voters one thing only to reverse yourself within weeks or even sometimes days. But the point I'm going for is you change your tune on so many things, and that has some people saying, what is his core?
Megyn, I have a very strong core. I have a very strong core. But I've never seen a successful person who wasn't flexible, who didn't have a certain degree of flexibility. You have to have a certain degree of flexibility.
Eric, is that what we're seeing now?
Well, yeah, you know, this is a pattern with Donald Trump that every clause of every sentence uttered in every breath is subject to change, sometimes by the very next sentence. And this is actually, to his credit, going back to the exact same position he held until almost the day he announced for president and declared Mexicans rapists. In 2012, he attacked Mitt Romney for being too harsh on immigration. In 2013 and 14, he cajoled Republicans to actually allow people to stay here. It was only when he began running for president that he took the position we need to expel everyone everyone. Well, now he has the nomination, and he can actually go back to the position he had up until the day he announced.
Sheriff Joe, explain to us why, notwithstanding what we're hearing from him over the past 24 hours, obviously you are anti-illegal immigration. We all know that about you. Explain to us why you still believe in him and he still fully has your support.
He's had it to begin with, and he will always have it. He's a great guy, and sometimes people make comments taken out of context. Okay, so what's wrong with him studying a issue and trying to find out what's the best thing to do for our country? No, he's got good character, and that's what counts. Some people may not agree with me, but I think I know him pretty well. And when he says you're going to put the wall up, believe me, that wall is going up. You don't seem to talk about that. Mm-hmm. So now we're talking about the millions of people that are here, which is a very controversial subject right now. Something has to be done about that. Maybe Congress ought to do something and get some laws passed if you have to, or enforce the laws that we already have on the books. That's what we should do, and that's what I believe that Mr. Trump will
Jose, I'll give you the quick last word.
Sheriff, I did not cross that wall. I'm from the Philippines, actually. And illegal border crossings from Mexico are at its lowest level since the 1970s. Can we talk about facts when we talk about this issue? Donald Trump has been running a factless and inhumane campaign when it comes to immigrants in this country, and he can't just take it back. What's at stake in this election, to me, is really how we define American.
No, he's got a wall. He wants the wall to protect this country from terrorism and the drugs. Forget the drug traffic coming into our country.
I got to leave it at that. It's great to see you all. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Also tonight, a shocking story playing out at a major university, publicly funded. And it involves a select group of students receiving training to, quote, stop white people. This is funded by the public. Plus, big news on the 2016 race in some new polls from the swing states. Tucker Carlson, Kristen Soltis-Anderson, and Ben Domenech are all here next. Breaking tonight, 75 days from the election, Hillary Clinton is maintaining her 5+ point lead over Donald Trump in the average of all national polls. But in battleground North Carolina, the candidates are locked in a virtual tie. That has not stopped Trump's campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, however, from saying that the surveys aren't really telling the whole story. Why? So-called undercover Trump voters. We're hearing more and more of this. Joining me now to discuss it, Tucker Carlson, editor-in-chief of the Daily Caller, Kristen Soltis-Anderson, Republican pollster and Washington Examiner columnist, and Ben Domenech, publisher of The Federalist. So what Kellyanne is saying, and this we've heard this from a few Trump supporters now and campaign operatives, is there's the undercover voter who doesn't want to tell the pollsters that they're in Trump's camp because a social stigma has been attached to being a Trump voter in her mind. And so he's underpolling what he really is how he's really going to perform. Tucker, do you buy it?
I mean, there's probably some truth in it. I think it's a pretty slim hope to hang a campaign on. On the other hand, we just saw a pretty clear example of this in late June in Great Britain with the Brexit vote. So the night before the Brexit vote, the stay side, the anti-Brexit forces, were 4 points up in the polls. They won by 2, so that's a 6-point shift in 24 hours. The betting markets, which traditionally are pretty accurate because actual money's at stake, had it 90-10 stay, leave. The demographics were pretty similar to what we're looking at now. People who supported stay were the finance community, ethnic minorities, and young people. And I think what happened was a lot of those people didn't vote in the numbers that the leave people voted in. So that's not a crazy comparison, actually. If it gets tight, I think that could be real.
What do you think, Kristen?
In the primaries, there was a big difference between how Trump performed in calls where you had a live person asking someone over the phone, who are you voting for? And some of these surveys where it was online, where you're not saying to an actual person who you're voting for. Trump tended to do a little bit better in those surveys. But here in the general election, we're not seeing that same kind of divide. You know, as Tucker mentioned, there have been cases in the past where we have what we call social desirability bias. People think they've got to give the right answer on the phone, but it doesn't make up for the kinds of margins that we're seeing Trump down by in some of these key swing states. So I think to the extent that there are any missing Trump voters, there's also the chance that there are voters that are Democratic voters who get missed because they're hard to survey. Maybe they don't have landline phones and such. So there's a chance the polls could be off a little bit either direction. It is slim hope to hang a campaign on.
Ben, the Weekly Standard's Jonathan laid out, if Trump's actually winning, or basically suggesting if he's got all these voters who are prepared to vote for him but we don't know about him, then why did he reorg his successful campaign operation?
Absolutely. That's something you'd have to ask. I mean, it's one of these situations where, to Tucker's point earlier, if Donald Trump was able to make this close, if he was able to become more acceptable, more socially acceptable as a choice, I think that you would see much tighter numbers in all of these states. I think you'd be seeing him doing a lot better. I think the problem is that he's run through the course of what people know about Trump now. He's very much a settled proposition. People know who he is, and I think that these types of claims that there is some great mass of people out there who want to vote for Donald Trump and just haven't been willing to say that to a pollster, that's just too much of a reach at this point.
But now he is trying to mix it up, Tucker. I mean, clearly this shift on immigration is an attempt to bring more people into the fold and banking on his long-held belief that not a single one of his core supporters will leave no matter what he does or says.
Right. And that may be true. I do think it's a mistake to finesse a policy that hasn't been laid out yet, which is in effect what he's doing. I mean, look, the Brexit people won under the leadership of Nigel Farage because they articulated really clearly what it was about. And what it was about was democracy in action. He was making the case that, look, a small group of people make all the decisions in this country. It's supposed to be a democracy. It's not. And now's your chance to make your voice heard on behalf of borders and sovereignty and acting on behalf of your own country. That's a really powerful message. That's in effect what Trump is saying, but he's not saying it explicitly enough. I think if he were to shift to that and stop with this dumb, well, maybe a deportation force, maybe not. No. Big picture. Stick to the big picture. And I actually think even at this late date, he could pull it out.
What about, is Trump optimizing his schedule? I mean, what was he doing in Mississippi tonight?
Yeah, this is one of the big challenges that I see the Trump campaign really needs to readjust to. Is there are a handful of states that are going to decide this presidential election. We can talk about the national polls and just Trump up or down, is he down by 5 right now, down by 6, but it's really all about states like Ohio, states like Pennsylvania, like Virginia and Florida. And the Obama campaign in 2012 really focused on optimizing not just what state President Obama was going to travel to for campaign rallies, but what county in those states, and use data to decide what is the best way to optimize every hour of that candidate's time. And it seems to me that Donald Trump is really good at building a fan base. He's good at going places where he can get excited rallies, but that's not the same as putting together the electoral votes to be president.
Ben, quickly, the debates, how big a factor?
I think the debates could be a huge factor. The problem really is that in Donald Trump's case, you have to assume a campaign that doesn't really exist yet in terms of the people on the ground who could exploit a good performance in those debates and actually bring people into the fold, especially in those critical states that Kristen just mentioned.
Great to see you all.
Good to be with you.
Up next, Ben Shapiro with the story of the college campus now running the Stop White People training program on the public's dime.
With Megyn Kelly.
A head-turning story out of the State University of New York at Binghamton tonight. Resident advisors there being offered an optional training course called Stop White People 2K16. Supposedly this is diversity training, but some say it's actually racist. Ben Shapiro joins me now, an attorney and editor-in-chief of The Daily Wire, which broke this story. Ben, good to see you. What's this about?
So basically, there was a resident assistant program, a training program. 40 to 50 RAs attended it, and the goal was to teach all of these RAs how to deal with white privilege and all of the racism inherent on the campus, to explain that reverse racism didn't really exist, and to correct the misconceptions of all of what they called the undereducated people who think things like white privilege is a buzzword for leftism, and that people should actually be treated equally without regard to their race. So this is just plain leftist politics under the guise of re-education by a bunch of resident assistants. The university says, of course, that they had nothing to do with the content, but they assured everybody that retroactively there was nothing really objectionable. They were just using the term "Stop White People" facetiously.
It was a joke. Stop. I mean, can you imagine if there was a program like Stop Black People? The reaction that we'd get at a state, at a publicly funded university?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is absurd, of course. I mean, if you even try to give a lecture sponsored by a group on campus that has anything to do with race, there's a good shot that you'll be protested and shut down.
Yeah, as you know, firsthand.
Yeah, exactly. They can actually run a program called Stop White People 2K16. It's totally fine, neglecting, of course, the fact that most of the taxpayers in the state of New York are white and therefore subsidizing their education. Presumably most of the people giving the grants to the State University of New York are white.
But this is what the student says. The student group says, this is Vice President for Student Affairs says, look, it wasn't anti-white. We're trying to improve people's ability to handle conflicts around the issues of diversity and race, and it was very respectful. And, only a couple people complained.
Oh, to whom? Respectful to whom? Again, as you say, I mean, you title this thing Stop Black People, and the entire country shuts down. President Obama sends the DOJ to investigate. You call it Stop White People, and that's just another way of expressing yourself. It's just a way of bringing up conflict. I mean, listen, this is the sort of intellectual rigor that I would expect from the Harvard of Binghamton, but nonetheless, it's not exactly, I think, an even playing field with regard to white and black at these state universities.
Right, they're saying only a couple people, had, quote, mixed reaction, but what about those who didn't feel comfortable saying, hey, because they're worried they're going to be called a racist if they say, I don't really like this, it's making me feel uncomfortable. Ben, great to see you. We'll continue to follow it, and we'll be right back with a preview of Julian tomorrow night. Tune in tomorrow for part 2 of our interview with the founder of WikiLeaks, set to release, quote, significant new leaked information about Hillary Clinton. And watch his response when I ask him about who leaked these documents to him and whether the leaker was murdered in July. There was also speculation about whether your source was inside the DNC and whether it may have potentially been a man named Seth Rich who was killed. He was shot. Why are you so interested in Seth Rich's killer?
We're very interested in anything that might be a threat to alleged WikiLeaks sources.
I'm just asking you explicitly whether you believe somebody, connected with the DNC or somebody upset about the leak may have been behind it. Here is the answer tomorrow night, 9 p.m. See you then.